he really goes into it a lot. He was a yogi before he did any study of anatomy, but it's really cool how it does dovetail those two things. Every system in our body is that idea of sthira and sukha, balancing the steadiness, or for example, on a cell, the membrane of a cell, provides stability. The cell, if it didn't have a membrane, would just be mush, just like a river without banks is just, it was going to flow, be like a lake. So he talks a lot about how that balancing of strength or steadiness or structure or control, all of that, balances the opposite, the sense of ease, the sense of openness, and out of control. So control versus totally out of control. So it's all about bringing a balance into those things. And in yoga, that's called homeostasis. So yeah, there you go. So hi, Kimberly. Yeah, I know. I'm so glad that you guys came, and I'm glad
Thank
we
you.
have this recording because, I mean, the people just have not been wanting to do in person, and so yeah. But you guys are here, and I know it's not totally in person, but at least we get to see you.
Yes.
So
Yes, yes, yes. Let's see. So we only have a couple of hours. I think that it bears repeating that each time we come, whether it's philosophy or teaching or anatomy, that we dip in and over, and sometimes something will stick a little more than other times, but the more that we come back to it, the more is going to stick, I guess, right? And we can't just expect to get it all at once, especially when we're cramming into 2 hours. So just remember that. And then the other thing I was thinking about in preparation for today is that we have been moving in our bodies and experiencing, right, our bodies much longer than we intellectually know about our bodies. We don't study, like when you take driver's ed, you have to study the manual before you ever get behind the wheel. Well, in our bodies, we're behind the wheel before we ever study the manual. And a lot of times the manual's not even studied, right? So some really want to know all of the muscles and the bones and all of that. And that's part of, that in the whole pie of yoga, the engineers and the scientists, they want the degree of the bend of the knee and all of those things. And some of us want the feeling and all of those things, but you don't have to know unless you want to the names of all the muscles and all of the bones. But it is nice to be able to put them into your yoga teacher toolbox, the things that stick for you. Just wanted to put that in there to begin. And trying to decide how to go about this, thought that maybe we could, even though our body works as a whole, that we're going to part and parcel things. However, because for the sake of time, I'm going to show you some slides and then for each of them, and then we'll go and experience it. And I shouldn't say for everything because I'm not sure. I think we're going to focus. I'm not sure we're going to get to the shoulders. We'll experience the shoulders. I'm not sure I'm going to get in depth. I did in the shoulders. I don't think we have enough time for that. So somehow in the next month, I'll have to add something in because shoulders are pretty important. My husband just had a complete shoulder replacement. It's a pretty big deal, right? It's all important, but I'm not sure we'll get there. That said, I wanted just to cover a few things that we'll experience in the body, and that is the types of contractions there are. And, if you just take your arm out to the side, it doesn't matter which arm, and just make a bicep curl, right? And then just take the other hand and place it on your biceps, and you can feel that engaged, right? So this is as you bring your arm in and we're shortening the muscle toward the bone. This is a concentric contraction, right? Now keep that tone, but begin to extend your arm, but don't lose that bicep work. All right. So now that is eccentric contraction, where we're strengthening as we lengthen. And now keep the arm straight, ish. You can have a little bend. But think of holding that strength there. And that is an isometric contraction. So we're going to play with that in different parts of the body, right? So all of these things come into play, and that feeling of extending, that isometric hold, one of the effects And the cues that you might have heard would be hug your muscles to the bone. And that's not really the action, but it is the feeling and the sensation, something that we can kind of wrap our heads around, and we're experiencing it. And so that's, maybe you've heard that cue. It's the biomechanics of that would be co-contraction of muscles. So, and we could get really anatomical, but this is more about bringing all the anatomy into functional practice. So I don't think we'll spend very much time on this, but we've got the agonists and the antagonists, right? The muscles that are doing the work and the ones that are relaxing or lengthening so that they can do the work. So in this case, bicep curl, the agonist, and then we've got the triceps as the antagonist. But there are also some synergistic or prime movers, and that's that idea of that co-contraction where a lot of muscles are working to create that stability and strength component. Okay, so those are a few terms that we will use when we get on our mats, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, let me open it up so I can share. Sorry, I gotta find it. Okay, I'm going to share some images, and I wish I would have actually. Sorry, talking to myself because I'm on a different computer and I had to pivot. It's a little bit off of what I planned to do, but we'll get there really quick. For me, quick. Okay. It's taking me a little bit longer than I thought it would. Okay. Sharing. Share's great. Okay. All right. So we're going to start at the hips. There's a lot going on, right? The hips act as they're how our locomotion, how we get around, but they're also how we stand our ground. And there's a lot going on with the hip. This first part, the hip joint anatomy, we get into joints and ligaments, and we'll get into the musculature soon. So the coxal joint is an anatomical term for the hip joint. And then the head of the femur is the rounded top, right, of your thigh bone that fits inside of the socket in the pelvis. And this is the ball and socket of the hip. And then we get into the dish, which is the acetabulum, and we get into labrum, which is this little tissue. It's a fibrocartilage tissue that encircles, right, in the acetabulum. And then, this is a lot, but the whole point is for you to understand that all of these ligaments and the bone and the structure is really deep set structure for that stability purpose. But within it, when we get into the muscular section, that's where we're able to do all of the things, whether we're able to abduct, take the leg away, or adduct, bring the leg in, right, using the outer thigh muscles and the inner thigh muscles, or flexion or extension. But it all happens right here in this hip joint. Okay, then to open. There's got to be an easier way for me to do this. Can't think of what it is. Okay. On the other computer, it's all put together, but I should have saved it on the cloud and not hard drive. Okay, the second. Stop sharing. Share. Okay, we look at the anterior front, the front of the hip. It's pretty simple rendering, all from Paul Roche. Amazing, very clear illustrations that shows the ball in the socket with the ligaments and the muscles removed, so we can see, how this joint works. And the head of the femur is colored silver so that you can easily see the nature of that ball and socket joint. Okay, and then up the next one. I have to hit stop share and then share every single time. That's silly. Okay. Third one is the back of the hip that shows the ball and socket, again, without the muscles and the ligaments. And you can see what that looks like from the back. Actually, this is really fascinating to me because my youngest, Brooke, her fiance, he went in because he was having some issues with hip mobility. A lot of movement was hurting him, and they just so happened, it was a chiropractor's appointment that does x-rays, which is fantastic. I mean, they're going to do it right. That's a great way to do it because they didn't realize that they thought maybe there was something else going on in the ligaments or the muscles of the joint, but it actually was a bony structure, and there's a growth going on that lesser trochanter, so down on the bottom part of the femur, and they've got to go in and shave it off. So not, a lot of things happen because of ligaments. There can be a tear, labral tear, or there can be the muscular impingement, but it can also happen in this joint region, right? Sorry, in the bones. So that's a little side note. It was fascinating to me because I saw the x-ray and I was able to, because I've seen these photos, know exactly what they were looking at. And then we've got, let's see, that's the next one up. I feel like I've got to share them. I just feel like it's important, but I apologize for how slow. Stop sharing, share. Okay, I'm not going to apologize anymore. I've already said it. I don't need to do it anymore. Okay, fourth. So this shows the interior of the ball and socket. You see how it's kind of the head of the femur is pulled away from the joint itself. So you can kind of see how the head of the femur plugs into the acetabulum, right into that socket, and it's encircled by the labrum. And that reminds us that the hip joint is a full 360-degree circle, right? Working, that we want to create strength and flexibility into that entire circumference all the way around the joint with all of the muscles. And this illustration will help us when we start to layer in all of the muscles of the joint. Okay, next one. Okay, so this next image is, let's see. This is where it shows that just that cushion that's created with the labrum, and it's a horseshoe shape to cushion the ball, the femur head, and it allows it to glide more smoothly, within the socket. It's similar, if you're familiar with what the meniscus looks like in the knee. This is very similar in visually speaking. Okay. Then we've got ligaments on the front of the hip. Okay. So now we're moving from the proximal, and we're moving outward. So we're still very proximal, close. Proximal means close to the skeletal body, and then distal refers to, like the digits, the fingers further away. So we're just moving from the most inner layer to the outer. But right now, still pretty inner. But the ligaments in the front of the hip are really strong, powerful tissues that limit excessive hip extension and abduction. And that means that these ligaments, if they're really tight, excessively tight, may have a limiting effect on the hip extension that you do in your back bends that require the legs to be separated far apart, back bends, or poses that have your legs far apart, like bound angle, Baddha Konasana. And then we have on the front, the ligaments at the back of the hip. This is the last one for this before we get into muscles. Muscles are a little more sexy. That's a thing. I don't know. That's not the right word. Interesting. I guess I'll say sexy. Okay. The ligaments on the back of the hip. So this is an image of the back of the hip joint, and ischiofemoral ligament, which runs from oh my gosh, runs from the ischium to the femur, reinforces the backside of the hip joint, and it limits excessive internal rotation. Again, we didn't know those before we started walking, right? Or jumping or hiking or pedaling or anything really. Thankfully, they just work once we learn, how to do those things mentally. But we don't know that intellectually. Okay. So that is really as far as the joint itself and the ligaments around the joint. Then we get into, I'm going to pull this up now. We layer into muscular compartments, 5 muscular compartments. Now, let me pull a lot of clicking. Oh, okay. So this is, the joint structures and the muscles and the ligaments of the hips make for a better sequence and understanding how we're going to bring in, the teaching aspect. And when we're aware of all of the muscles that comprise the hip, we can start to teach with a little more intellect and efficacy how to and structure our sequences so that it's well-rounded targeting all of the components of the hip. If we were, going in and doing an exploration, cutting things open, it wouldn't be 5 separate compartments. It's all one, but we're going to treat them as 5, just so we have a little understanding. But remember how I said there's the prime movers and there's synergistic, the co-contractors. That's definitely happening, right? If one thing's going on in the front of the hip, something else is going on in the back of the hip, and we're going to get into play with that in a minute. It gives us a really strong foundational map when we are able to understand all of these components of the hip, the 5 components and their functions. But there is a lot of crossover. Okay, so the hip flexors is one that we all get excited about as teachers, I think, because of the psoas, that's psoas major, and what's going on there. So the hip flexors include psoas, the iliacus, psoas major, psoas minor, and there's one quadricep muscle that crosses over and plays for both the hip flexors and the quads. So we'll get there. And that's the rectus femoris. So you won't see that here, but one of the quads, the rectus femoris, is also a hip flexor. And these muscles rotate the front of the pelvis and the front of your thighs toward each other. They are actively contracted in forward bends and core focused work. And the hip flexors are the most often limiting factor in yoga back bends. We're tight in our hips. It's going to be really hard to move into a camel because of what's going on with the psoas and the way it attaches to the lumbars to limit back bends. So that's something to understand. And let's see what happens if the hip flexors are really tight, that we have those release valves, and then the lower back is what's compromised because we're compensating for those overly tight hip flexors. Okay, stop sharing. Okay, share this one. There's a lot of toggling. I wish I would have saved it to the cloud. It would have been much easier for me just to scroll. Okay, so this image is not the image I want. Just a second. Let's see. Oh, yeah, no, it is. Okay, so this image shows that rectus femoris muscle, see it? And how it's a double duty muscle working with the other quadriceps. And it is technically considered one of the quads to straighten the knee. That's the quad's job. And it works with the other hip flexors to flex the hip. Like the psoas and the iliacus, the rectus femoris strongly contracts in most core strengthening postures and lengthens in all back bends. Okay, almost going to move. Really close, just a few more slides. Then we get into, this is a cross section of shows the adductors running between the hamstrings, back of the thigh, and the quads in the front. And when you contract your adductors in core strengthening work and you stretch them in the postures where you separate your legs, such as asana and most standing postures, right? So that is these adductor muscles are the inner thigh ones. This great cross section, I think, of how that all works. Okay, so see how they're all part of it. Then we get into the hamstrings, which is actually where we're going to start when we get onto our mat. Okay, so the hamstrings include the semimembranosus muscle, we've got the semitendinosus muscle, the biceps femoris muscle. That's the one that, if I'm going to say one, I'm not going to say the semi ones. Obviously, I'm going to slaughter them probably, but biceps femoris is probably the one, if I'm going to say it, and it's, that big one. It's one I'm going to say, if I say it at all. Usually it's just hamstrings. Okay, and we strengthen our hamstrings when in yoga? Well, prone back bends like locust and bow. And then we stretch. It's a passive stretch most of the time in yoga. They kind of get taken along for the ride unless we have that awareness to engage them in that eccentric contraction and strengthen them in their lengthened position. But usually, all forward folds, and whether they're standing or seated, it's a lengthening going on, right? So if we know what we're doing, we can actively engage them, because the hamstrings tend to get overlooked as far as yoga goes. Bridge could be another place. If you flip the bow over, right? It's another place that we can focus on strengthening if we are mindful about it. Okay. Then we get into the external rotators and the gluteus max. All right. So I guess when I said sexy, I guess this is it. But just because there's so much going on, right? And this image just shows, we talk about the glute max, right? On the left side of your image, we have the gluteus maximus. But when we take that away, so on the right side of the image, we remove that, we see all of these external rotators that live underneath the maximus. And so they would be more proximal to the bones than the glute max, right? Glute max is further away from the bones. And you can see how layered and dense this region is. There is a lot going on. We can strengthen the external rotators, engaging in standing postures and back bends. We also can strengthen them in some of the transitions between postures and vinyasa and flow. And we stretch these groups in pigeon variations and other cross-legged forward bend variations. There's a lot going on. You see it? See the piriformis. Though we're not going to get into all of the nerves. There's no way we can do all of that too. So I want to be able to move a little bit. It's almost time, but the piriformis can tend to press against the sciatic nerve and cause piriformis syndrome or sciatica, that shooting pain that can either go up or down the leg. And so understanding, the roles, not just to stretch them, but to create some stability and strengthen them, can aid in supporting a little higher up the body, right, into the lower back, and also supporting mobility so that we're not shuffling. Okay, let's see, almost done. We have the abductors, or the lateral thigh muscles. So your abductors, you can see the glutes, the tensor fasciae latae, which sounds like coffee to me, and in this illustration. So the outer thigh, or the lateral side. And we have to make a concerted effort to strengthen these muscles, since they don't automatically engage in most postures except for standing balance poses. So these are things that we need to do. We got to think about actively engaging those muscles so that we can create a little more of that stability. So if you think of standing balance poses, Gomukhasana, we would stretch this area, right? Gomukhasana. But in the one that we're crossing over, but the standing one is, if we really engage, it stabilizes and holds. So the leg that's crossing over, Gomukhasana I'm thinking of Garudasana, eagle, not Gomukhasana. Yes, we're still stretching the top leg and cow face pose, but it's eagle pose that I was talking about. The one leg is getting stretched in the abductors, but the other leg is stabilizing to hold us and keep us standing. Okay, let's see. All right. So I think I'm gonna have to now. I think I'm just gonna hit pause on that. No, I wanna. Yeah, we're just gonna go upstairs. I'm gonna go upstairs. So if you want to take a quick break, it's gonna take me a couple of minutes to get upstairs, and then we can work all of those hip compartments, and then we'll see what we've got left if we're gonna get into core. Okay. So I will see you soon. Okay. I'm back on my phone. Not sure what's happening with the laptop. I gotta prop it up a little higher. Just talking to myself. Okay. All right. So we're gonna just move through those compartments to kind of see how it comes into play on our mats. And see me? Yeah. Hopefully we're good. So just take a seat. I'm gonna put a blanket underneath my hips if you wanted to do that. That just gives a little bit of an anterior forward tilt of the pelvis, which we look for, especially when we're going towards forward bending. But just take one of your legs. Actually, let's come down onto the back, it'll be easier, and then we'll come up. Sorry, changing my mind again. Okay, place your feet on the floor. I don't know if you can see me. I think you can see me. My phone's so small, I can't really tell. Draw your right knee in. And, from here, this is passive, right? Because we're using our hands to help flex the joint. So this is flexing the joint, right? So take your hands now behind your thigh and extend your leg, but keep a bend in the knee. And with your hands, just, get in there about mid thigh. So not at the hip and not at the knee, but somewhere in the middle. And just kind of palpitate. Let's do a little exploration. And walk your hands as you palpitate towards that gluteal tie-in, the shelf. Okay, and then walk back towards that center point. And now, same thing, walk your hands towards your knee. Just get in there, little, massage, or let your fingers do the walking. And then, okay, so just that awareness and experiencing it can help knowing where we're going with the hamstrings. Okay, so now you can take your hands away. And with your knee slightly bent, think of from the back of the thigh towards, your hip, and then the back of the thigh towards the knee, activating, and start to lengthen and straighten your knee, but keeping that tone on the back of the thigh. Now there's something going on in the front too. That's quadriceps, and we're not doing that yet. So, right, so just do a few of those. So bend your knee a little bit and think of activating just right in the back of the thigh, and then re-extend. And now we're just gonna add in, we didn't talk because we didn't go all the way down, but we're just gonna add into this tone by bringing in the calf muscle. So now just walk your hands from the knee towards your ankle, your heel. Get in there, just activating those muscles. Okay, and then rebend. And now think from the center of your thigh towards the hip and towards the knee. Think about straightening, but also from the back of the hip joint to your heel. So we're going to just a couple of those layers again. So we're going to activate the hamstrings, but we're also going to activate the calf muscles. All right. So we're using the thing that does the thing to do the thing. All right. Other side. Draw your leg in. This is not using the thing that does the thing to do the thing, right? If we were really just using hip flexors, we wouldn't use the hands. We would just flex at the hip. All right. Okay, same thing. Get your leg extended, but with a soft bend in the knee. And to the center of your thigh, just get in there, palpitate towards the gluteal hamstring tie-in, and then back, and then walk towards your knee with your fingers. Just a little palpitation there. Get in there. A lot of times we're not engaging the hamstrings, but we're in a forward bend, they can be hanging out in the ligaments in the knee, or we are pulling on the lower back. So if we can really focus on strengthening in their lengthened position, the hamstrings, it's going to create a lot more stability and functionality of the hip in our forward bends. It'll feel better. Okay, so now just think of the center of the thigh toward the hip and the center of the thigh towards the knee to straighten the leg and rebend. It's a little harder to feel here than seated or when we get onto all fours, but we are able to use our hands a little bit easier. Okay, now take your hands and palpitate from the back of the knee towards your heel. Just getting into the calf muscles. Back down. That's good. Okay, and then from here, the soft bend in the knee. Think of those two different layers. We've got the inner layer from the center of the thigh to the hip and the center of the thigh to the knee. And then we've got that secondary from the hip to the heel. Start to use the muscles in the thigh and then the calf muscles to extend the knee. Do that a couple of times. All right, we're here. Never mind, because I want to get hip flexors in there too. So come on up and let's come to all fours. From all fours, tone the abdominal muscles. So engage, so we're not hanging out in the lumbars. And tie up here. Stretch your right leg long behind you. Bend your knee and start to kick your heel towards your bum. So now we are right, shortening those muscles in the hamstring. Keep that work, and we're just going to bring the glutes online too. So now, like, you're imprinting your foot. So you don't have to lift your leg up because we don't want to dump into the lumbars, but press like you're imprinting your foot in the air. Strong plank arms, toned abdominal center. Now keep all of that and think of that work we just did with the hands and the fingers, and from the center of the thigh to the hip to the knee, and from the hip to the heel, begin to extend the leg, but keep the hamstrings active. And release. Left side. Press with the hands. Tone your abdominals. Curl your heel toward your bum. So hamstring curl. And begin to press the foot like you're imprinting your foot in the air. Keep that, all of that work, and think of those muscles now as you eccentrically contract, which means you're lengthening, you're strengthening in the lengthened position. And then hold that, and that's isometric. Okay, and then release. From here, take downward facing dog. Put a pretty big bend in your knees. Press down and away through the hands. From here, lift your sitting bones up and just start to employ the muscles in the back of the legs to straighten the knees. And then release. Knees to the floor, hands come back. Okay, now have a seat. We're going to bring the quads online now, as well as hamstrings. So whether you have the blanket underneath your hips or not, totally up to you. But put a soft bend in the knees, or good, and think of that work. So from the hamstrings start to work and engage, and you can start to extend the legs. And even though we can't because the floor is in the way, but as if you're going to do a hamstring curl, start to think about pulling energetically your heels towards your butt. Okay, so keep all of that. And now with your hands on your front of your toes are dorsiflexion. Fins are up, dorsi, rather than plantar flexion where your balls of the feet are pressing away. Okay, so with the toes up, you're already starting to shorten the muscles on the front of the leg, right? So the back of the leg is eccentric lengthen. It could also be just passive and then we fold. That would be one way to do it. But if we actively engage, we're going to get a little more out of it. Okay, so actively engage the back of the thighs in their lengthened position. And now with your hands on your quads, think of and maybe even just walk your hands or slide your palms from the knees up towards your hips. And think of there's a cue, it's been around for ever. It doesn't get used a lot. Iyengar uses it. Lifting your kneecaps. Maybe you've heard that cue. It's kind of a weird cue, but it's to lift your kneecaps, you're engaging your quads. You feel it? From there, move back to downward facing dog and do both. Press, as you press into your hands, you put a soft bend in your knees. Think about the back of the legs to engage those muscles to lengthen but strengthen them. And think of the front of the thighs lifting the kneecaps. All right. Step your right foot between your hands. Lower the left knee down. Your toenails on the floor. If you've got blocks, you could utilize your blocks, but just pull back we'll move from a little dynamic movement from a half monkey pose to a low lunge pose and back. So just take your time and think of what's going on in the front of the left hip when you come into the low lunge and the back of the right hip as you come into half monkey, Ardha Hanuman. Just do a couple of those. Now come into the lunge and stay. You're not on top of the kneecap. It won't feel great. And you could also put a cushion underneath or fold your mat over, but kick your heel towards your bum. So if you're a little higher on your leg right above the kneecap, it's going to feel a little bit better. Kick your heel toward your bum and actively engage the hamstrings. And then you can slowly re-extend the leg. It's a little harder to get there, but we've got that awareness. Come on up into a low lunge. And from here, start to lift those hip points. Just lift them up a little bit. It's going to increase the sensation in the front of your left hip. Since we're here and for time, I don't think I can compartmentalize too much. Take your right thumb into your hip crease. So we just activate and stabilize the outer thigh muscles. So with your right hand into your hip crease, you can stretch your left arm up. Press strongly into the top of the left foot. Start to stretch over to the right with the left arm and notice down the side of the body, not only the side of the leg, but you also are going to go across and get a little hip flexor action there, right? Feels so good. Side bends and release, hands down. Side bends are a really great way to access the psoas muscle when they're done in a lunge like that. Okay, bring your hands to the floor. And you could put a bend in the knee again and think about the muscles in the back of the thigh working. Think about the quadriceps, lifting the kneecap toward them a little more. And straight is relative. Straight is ish relative to what your body is doing. Hands come inside. Take your right leg straight back. Okay. With your hands on the floor, strong toned core. Kick your heel towards your bum. Imprint your footprint into the air. Lengthen the front of the knee away from the hip joint so we feel that lengthening in the front of the hip flexors, and release. And downward facing dog. Press down and away. Roll your sitting bones up. Begin to use the muscles in the front, the anterior of your body, and the posterior to straighten your legs. Step your left foot forward. Lower the right knee down. Take a few dynamic lunge, half monkey pose with your breath. Dynamic movement is a really great way to warm the muscles of the body before holding in a stronger, like isometric hold, right? Just a little movement in a lot of places. Sun salutations are dynamic. Come into the lunge and stay. Kick your heel towards your bum. Keep that work, but release your right foot back down. Come on up. Hook the left hip, left thumb with your left into your left hip. Reach your right arm up. Pull. So think about your right thigh muscles just pulling back, even while your hamstrings engaged. Get tall. Start to stretch over to the left. As you have your left hand in your hip crease, you're just keeping those muscles engaged, increasing the crease, so you can get a little more length into the right side, into the front of the right hip and the hip flexor compartment. Come back down, hands to the floor, pull your toes up and your hips back, and with the knee bent, begin to activate your Hanuman. Hands inside, take your leg back, left toes straight back, tone your abdominals, bend your left knee, kick your heel toward your bum, activating your hamstrings, imprint, activate your glutes, lengthen the front of the knee away from the hip. Good stuff. Downward facing dog. Okay, now we're going to access outer hip in this downward dog pose, and it can get a little confusing. So bend your right knee. So if you need to look, you could. Bend your right knee, press down and away from the earth, and pivot your left heel in. So your left toes are turned out, your right knee is bent, your left leg is straight. As you press firmly into the floor with the hands, you should feel a little more length through the outer left thigh, the lateral, or the abductors, abductors. And then come back, normalize your dog, activate the quads, activate the hamstrings. Now bend your left knee, pivot your right heel in and your right toes out. Press away from the floor, and as you do so, you can start to lengthen into the right side, especially that lateral hip compartment. Come back through center, shift to plank. Knees or toes, lower to the floor. All right, from here, bring your forehead to your hands. I'm just gonna not do that, so I'm not talking into the floor. But with your forehead on your hands, and just start to stretch your legs a little bit longer. Think here, let's do it the way we've been doing it. So first the hamstrings. Kick your right heel toward your bum. Move your hip points toward the floor. So that anterior tilt, the dog tilt, cow tilt, is employed to keep us out of the lumbars. Kick your heel toward your bum, and then start to imprint your foot. So, but keeping those hip points down. Keep all of that work, memorize it, straighten your leg. Think about lifting the kneecap. So firm the quadricep muscle and release. Other side. Bend your left knee. Hip points, both of them, toward the floor. That's that cow tilt, dog tilt. Kick your heel toward your bum. Imprint your footprint in the air. Keep the hip points toward the floor. Keep all of that work, and now start to eccentrically contract your hamstrings as you extend your left knee. Hug the muscles to the bones and think about the quadriceps lifting your kneecap a little bit more. And release. All right, reach your arms back. You could rest your forehead on the floor. You could rest one side of your face to the floor. So that muscle memory is great, and because we've palpitated and we've talked about it, and if we do any of those little precursors in our classes, our students are going to be able to power those because the muscle memory is, they're going to be able to know exactly what we're asking them to do. So keep your legs straight, but with the tops of your feet on the floor, you hip points to the floor, can you lift your kneecaps? Engage your hamstrings, think of that curl, even though we're not curling, and lift your feet. Think of the quadriceps engaging, lifting the kneecaps a little more, hip points roll to the floor, and start to lift into locust. Your fingers could stay grounded, or you could take flight. Glutes are engaged, hamstrings are engaged, hip points toward the floor, anterior tilt or dog tilt, cow tilt, stabilized. And then release, press up, take child's pose. Okay, what should we do? Hands by your knees, curl your toes under, forward fold. Okay, standing forward fold, same as the other forward folds. With your knees bent, shake out your head. Sometimes I'll start it this way without, lying down or back or seated, and I'll let the fingers do the walking here on the back of the thighs, toward the hips and back of the thighs toward your heels. But we've already done that. Your feet hip width apart. Press into the floor. Drag your heels back energetically. And think about the muscles in the back of the leg and the front of the leg working equally to straighten in a strengthened position. The knees. Much different than hanging out in a forward fold with that tight pull on the lower back, leaning out of the hamstrings because it hurts so bad. So this posture, ut is deliberate or intense, and tan is to stretch. And yeah, it could be intense stretch of the back body, but it's not that, and granted it can be, but it's deliberate in our intention and our awareness and our actions and our intensity in those actions. That's what that is, not just your hamstrings are tight and tense. So back of the knee toward your heel, back of the knee toward your bum, quadriceps lift the kneecaps. That's the deliberate and intense, I think. Release, hands to the thighs, cat your way up. Your hamstrings are gonna talk to you. It's gonna be great. Okay, so mountain pose. So we've got the front of the hip, the anterior flexes, right? Brings the leg closer, and posterior, back of the leg, hamstrings, glutes, extend, right? So we've got flexion, extension. Stand on do both sides, just so we get equal opportunity. So whatever leg you just did, do the other, and extend, and okay. Now let's a little more of the outer hip, and we'll continue. So stand on your right foot, take your left toes at a diagonal, just out off the mat a little, root down, and then come back through center and do it to the other side. So we don't really do this in yoga, right? It's not typical movement in yoga asana, but it's just so we have a little understanding. Does that mean you can't do it? No, absolutely not. Especially if you're teaching somebody about bringing that awareness of those stabilizers online. Okay. From there, balance on your right leg, flex your left hip, bring your knee up. You could work from the knee bent, or a little more from your hip flexors, extend your left leg. Oh, right side stabilizing, and drop the left knee toward the floor. Hands level on your hips, and then the hip points are gonna just tip down, the tailbone will lift a little bit, kick your heel towards your bum, activate the hamstrings. Keep that, hinge a little more from the hips. You can put a bend in the right knee to activate your quads, and then re-extend. Keep the hamstrings engaged on the left side. Slowly begin to extend, so eccentric, lengthening to warrior 3 variation with a wall. And then come on up, other side. Okay, ground onto your left side. Lift your right knee, flexing your hip. You can keep with the knee bent or extend your leg. The rectus femoris is definitely working, but it's hip flexor work and core. And the hip flexors are actually, I'll have to do another video because there's no way we're getting into core. But hip flexors are like the subfloor of your core. Okay, rebend your knee, drop the knee toward the floor. Hip points toward the floor. Kick your heel toward your bum, activate your hamstrings and your glutes. Begin to hinge a little more. Straighten your left leg, but working eccentrically. So in their strengthened position, the hamstrings are lengthening. Come back up. Now take your left foot into tree. Okay. So inner thighs, outer thighs into the mix. Give the hamstrings a little break. Okay. So with your right foot grounded and your left foot, it can be a low tree or high, your choice. Think about hugging your hips toward each other, keeping the pelvis level. And from here, you could even, with your left hand, just trace a line from your inner thigh toward your inner knee, and then just kind of sweep over the top of the knee to the outer knee and pull from your outer knee into your outer hip. Pull like you've got bootstraps. Pull up on the right side. So the lateral, the abductors are working on that right side. The left side adductors are stretching. Well, we're strengthening them too in their lengthened position, and we're opening up into that outer left hip. All right, release, other side. Ground your left foot, right foot into tree. And first, we keep the pelvis level. So sometimes we hitch a ride. When that happens, one hip goes a little higher than the other, and that's going to pull across the lower back. So whether your foot's high or low is not as important as keeping the pelvis in a neutral position. And with your right hand, just trace a line from your inner thigh out to the inner knee. And you can go over the thigh and pull from the outer knee to the outer hip. Left side, pull up. Like you've got your superfascial tights pulling up. Your left quad is lifting. And then release. Okay, step back. It doesn't matter which, we'll do both. Step back so you're wide angle, a wide stance on your mat. And let's turn the right toes out. Yeah, right toes out to a warrior two stance. Right heel, left arch, or wider. Even though we're not getting in shoulder or core, we're still using them. So I'm gonna give you a little bit for upper back and shoulder, the upper back and the sides of the back. So take your arms up and like you're holding a pull-up bar and use some perceived resistance. So think of like the chin-up bars. It's not easy, at least not for me. And start to pull your elbows to the same height as the shoulders. You can bend into the right knee. Keep that work. So we got that same idea. We're just thinking a little bit ahead outside the box. So keep that work in the arms, but extend them. So now they're working in their lengthened position. Drop your right sitting bone, lift the left inner thigh. So the left inner thigh and the outer thigh are stabilizing and allowing that right leg to go deeper. If you wanted to focus a little more on that external rotation, you could hook your right thumb into your hip crease and crease the crease, right? Or you strengthening the adductors of your inner right thigh of lengthening out, pulling in. Same thing that we did in tree. Push away from the floor, lift your right toes, pivot them to the long side of the mat and turn your left toes. Same thing, left side. Grab your chin up bar, perceived resistance, bring your elbows to the height of your shoulders. Keep that work in the shoulders and the upper back and the sides of the back and the arms. Extend. Without taking your hand to the hip crease, can you crease the left hip? Inner left thigh lengthen out to the knee, lift the right inner thigh up. So the outer right foot down. Strong. This is an isometric hold, right? 5 breaths, a lot. We'll do 3. Push up, straight. Left toes straight ahead. Turn your right toes to the right. This time, instead of bending your right knee, spread the mat apart with your legs, grounding down. Keep that action and then pull that energy up. So spread apart, pull up, and begin to move your torso over your right thigh. Right quadriceps engaged, right? Can you feel it? Firm up. Back of the right leg, we can firm up the hamstrings there. And just reach the back of the hand to the inside of the shin, or if you've got a block, you can utilize the block. Stretch the left arm up. To refine it, keep that rooting down, spread the mat apart, even as you pull in. Outer hips toward each other. Lift inner thigh zips up. Back of the right thigh, lengthened and strengthened. Rebend on up. Push away from the floor. Turn your right toes alongside the mat. Left toes to the left. Spread your mat apart. Firm up. Pulling all your connective tissue, your superficial holistic tights. Pull up. The one thing about being in person, at least I get giggles, even if they're not deserved. Here's just dead air. I need to have like that applause sign or something. Spread apart, pull in. So now we're going to lengthen the left side body over. Keep pressing apart, pull in, and you should start to feel a lot of work on the inner thighs, so the adductors. And I don't think I mentioned this, but your inner thigh muscles and your hamstrings, they like everything, it all works together. But you probably can feel that hamstring and inner thigh work. You can brush your back of the hand to the shin, the right arm up. The reason the hand not palm onto the shin is because that can cause, we're not doing the thing that does the thing to do the thing anymore. Now we're just leveraging, and we can tend to bow a little bit back and hang out in the ligaments and the joints and not create that strength that we are all wanting. We talk so much about yoga being stretch, but really stability pays the rent. And then from that place of strength, then we can safely work to mobilize and lengthen, right? Bend your knee, come on up, push away from the floor and turn your toes alongside the mat. Okay, so wide angle forward fold. We're employing the quads in the front, right? We're lifting them. We're lengthening in a strengthening in a lengthened position, the hamstrings in the back. But now we've got inner thighs and we've got the outer thighs. So the inner thighs are getting a little stretched, the outer thighs are getting a little stability and strength going on. With the hands on your hips, tilt the hip points, the ASIS, anterior superior iliac spines, is their named acronym, ASIS, to the floor, and the tailbone's going to lift. Tone the abdominals, press into the mat, and hinge. Bring your hands to floor or block, and stay higher for a moment. Put a little bend in your knees and do the same thing, but now we've got to activate the inner and outer feet, right? As well as using the muscles on the anterior, the front of the leg, and the posterior, the back of the leg, to straighten the knee joint. Think about drawing your heels back, which should help move you a little deeper forward. You can If you feel like releasing your head a little more, fine. If not, you can stay in that half, whether your hands are on blocks or on the floor. Inner thighs are moving back. Outer thighs are drawing up and in toward each other. There's that stabilizing action. And then come on up, flat back. Work your way to the front of your mat, wherever that is for you. Back, downward dog or child. Use the skill. Back of the knee toward the heel, front of the knee, quads lift, the kneecaps, inner thighs start to lift them back. All right, lower your knees and have a seat. See, you can orient your weight however you would like, but we're gonna do a 90-degree sit. So I think I'm gonna orient myself to, because we're gonna do, just give you a little foreshadowing, we're gonna do a little, going back to my dance days when I showed this to Debbie at her house in McCall, Shy Not Shy. So that's what we're gonna do in a minute. But right now, so whatever, however you wanna be on your mat, but your right shin parallel to one edge of your mat and your left shin parallel to another side of the mat, whether you're facing long side or short side, doesn't matter. But get really tall here. And we've got one leg internally rotated. So think of going back to the first images of the ball and socket, right? So think of what's going on with the right hip. It's externally, the femur's rotating outward, and the left hip is internally rotating. Now, depending on our own bodies, depending on where, because they all look different, I didn't show you that. All pelvises are not created equally. Some pelvises, the hip sockets are a little more forward, some are a little more wide. So the ones that are a little wide, it's going to be a lot easier for them to do like that front leg pigeon pose, right? Or a little wide angle forward fold. It's going to be a little easier to go into that than if your hips sockets are a little more forward on your pelvis than up the side. Okay, so just notice what the left side is internally rotated and the right side is externally rotated. Get tall. So this is a 90-degree sit, used a lot in PT, and I love it because for people that can't go into pigeon because of that huge hip extension in the back so in this case it would be the left leg, we're offsetting it. We're gonna go into pigeon. Yeah, we'll get to pigeon. But right now we really want to focus on the work. So pressing into the floor equally. And sometimes if things are tight, we kind of offset, right? So for me, I feel a little bit this left side and my right knee does not love pigeon. So I'm kind of wanting to get out of it. It's not, and by the way, I know my body, it's sensation and it's a little bit of mental. If it was pain, I would be, maybe going a little wider with my legs or maybe adding a blanket underneath my hip to allow for a little more stability. So pain is your body's way of saying change, fix it. Sensation, knowing, what your body does, it's different. Okay, that's a lot. But just start to press down and notice if you kind of lean out. Now, if you're leaning out because of pain, maybe widen your stance a little bit. It's not 90 degree anymore. Or put a blanket, wedge it under your front leg, or even under, if I wedge it, if I wedge it underneath my right hip, so if I just did it equally, it's not going to change anything. If I wedge it under my right side, it's going to counterbalance me, right? It's going to, instead of going to this right, which is what I was doing, I'm going to go a little more left, okay, which is what I want, a little more balance. I don't want to go left, but I want to be balanced between the two. So even in asymmetric poses, we're looking for symmetry and balance. I like to use the scales analogy. So we want to think about equal, without numbers, but equal balance between what one side is doing than the other. Now we're going to employ the forward fold, which is a little bit different because our legs aren't straight, like downward dog or standing forward fold or seated forward fold or lying on our backs. But we still can press down with the hip points down, keep the lumbars supported, abdominals are strong, and walk your hands wide so we're still, thinking of staying balanced between the right and the left. Pull your right shin and your right knee in towards you to move you forward a little more. So this is getting lateral hip, right? All of those outer thigh muscles, the abductors, which unless you're a speed skater, can I think of anything else? You're not really taking, or ballet, you're not abducting your leg away from you in normal activities of daily living. We flip to the other side. Oh, okay. We stabilize with those abductors more than we take the leg out to the side, right? We're not really doing that unless we're doing exercises, which is great. Those exercises aren't, leg lifts or using I can't think, the abductor machine to take the leg out and in, right? That's not, because that's what we do in everyday life. It's to stabilize us. It's really what we're doing. Okay. So first, gain purchase with the floor, pressing down. And if you need to add, so my pigeon on my left side is chef's kiss. I don't need the blanket. Now, somebody else might be vice versa, or, something else. So just take a moment to balance. And now walk your hands, actually, no, let's not do the hands first. Think about drawing your left shin, left knee, and right knee in towards you as you hinge. So that movement of pulling your legs towards you should move you forward without dumping into the lower back. It will help keep the spine long. Abdominals are strong. Walk your hands off. Find the balance in this asymmetrical pose where your right leg is internally rotated and your left leg is externally rotated. Observe your breath. In the text, lots of content on using the asana, to tap into the energetics, the emotional and the mental aspects of the body. The energetics can affect the emotional and mental bodies. So like breath work, not so much the physical. It can subtly shift us out of the fight or flight, but that's more of a emotional sense. It does help relax the body in some way. And then meditation is thought to just in meditation, tap into the mental or spirit aspects of the practice, right? The physical is the one that encompasses everything, which is why taking a walk after something stressful can be so helpful, or walking into a yoga class when you're feeling low or angry or any of the emotions that you can feel, well, it's not magically going to wipe away. At least that's never happened to me, but I do have some clarity about it, and it can affect the whole. So the physical affects everything, the energetics affect emotional and the mental, and then meditation can affect, and I'm not saying only, but it's easier to encompass everything through the whole practice. Come on up. And then just go side to side. See how that feels. I used to teach a dance class, and this was shy, and then this is not shy, and then shy. So we're just doing not shy. Notice if you're moving, my hips are moving a little bit, moving a little more towards you. All right, now take your legs out wide. This is like the standing forward fold. I'm gonna put a blanket under my hips. That fold, I sit on it and then I slide it off. And that creates a blanket underneath hips. Lots of teachers will suggest it. A lot of people don't think they need it because they think it's like a crutch. Actually, it's a tool. So if people are sitting like this without the blanket, right, those hip points have nowhere to go, and then we try and fold forward, and it's only going to go in the lower back, and the scrunchy neck. So if you sit up on something or a couple of somethings, and then just allow the hip points. So, here we think about the front of the block here, the hip points are lifting, the tailbone's dropping, but you put a blanket underneath, and now your hip points drop a little bit, and the tailbone's going to lift, not this much, but relative. That's going to get us out of the lower back. So when we want to move into a forward bend, we want to get a little bit of that anterior tilt. Sorry. And when we go into back bends, we want a little bit of the back posterior tilt. Okay, so whether you not have a blanket underneath you or not, the hip points are down a little bit to lengthen out of the spine. Think about your feet pulling into your hips. As your feet pull into your hips, think about the backs of the knees, back of the hamstrings, working there in their lengthened position. Feet pulling into your hips, so we've got the outer hips stabilizing us, and the inner thighs are lengthened. And that pulling into yourself, activating the thighs, activating back of the thighs, the front of the thighs, stabilizing through the outer hips allows us to move forward. And then we can feel that deep work in the adductors, the inner thigh muscles, the hamstrings. One of the things that's really cool, because we don't I mean, I don't think about concentric or eccentric contractions when I'm coming down a mountain or going up the stairs, or, I mean, unless I'm thinking about it, but we don't have to. And there's some stopgaps or safeguards in place, reciprocal inhibition. So if we're, stretching the back body, the front body is going to engage to hold us and to keep us from going too far, or vice versa. So when we utilize those muscles and we co-contract, right, hug the muscle to the bone, that effect, we can do a little bit of an override, but in a safe way. Come on up. It doesn't matter. Bring one leg in front of the other, cross-legged, and wanted to include these seated positions, especially Sukhasana, because sometimes we'll just say take a cross-legged position, and there's a lot going on. So the reason we want to stack the knees and the ankles is to create a little more of that semblance of stability. So if you press down and then think about your outer knees pulling into outer hips, sides of the waist long, think of the body pulling. So in this case, your shins and your knees pulling towards you to help move you into your forward fold before you bring your hands down. So lots of strength here. And walk towards the front leg. So for me, it's going to be my right. For you, might be the other. Bring the same hand as that front leg back by its hip. Press down and back. Spider walk your other hand forward. Pressing down into the ankles, the knees, the hips. Come up into a twist. It doesn't have to be deep, where you're rotating one side of the body towards the back of your space, on the other side forward, come back through center. And before we go to the other side, bring your knees in and just flex your hips. So here, Navasana boat is key. It's deep core, right? And the hip flexors are online, especially when we pull the knees in really close. And you could extend the legs or not, and cross the other leg in front, get tall. Ankles and knees stacked. Outer knees are pulling into outer hips, inner thighs lengthening. Inner knees, and think about your shins and your knees pulling in towards you to help you hinge forward. And then you can use your hands, but find that balance. So that 90-degree sit, we had one leg in internal rotation and one leg in external. Now we're symmetrical, right? Well, mostly we've got one leg in front of the other. So you might notice the similarities and differences between those sides. Walk towards the front leg. Bring your same hand as that front leg back by its hip. Press down and pull back, and spider walk the other hand forward at a diagonal. Come up into a seated twist, and using the muscles to do the thing. We're rotating using the spinal muscles and the core muscles to rotate. Nice twist, keep the sides of the waist long, come back through center, and soles of your feet together. Take Baddha Konasana, another symmetrical pose. So whether you have a blanket underneath you or not. It hasn't happened in a long time, but kickboxing injury, my right knee, back in when I was young and did stupid things that didn't know I was going to be paying for 30 years later. But I can't tell you how many times I had teachers come and push my knee down, whether it was in pigeon or in this pose. So if you see me, my left side, no problem. No problem. My right side is like hard. So that's, the reason it hasn't happened in a long time is because I think we've learned we don't do that. I hope that's the case. But there's a better way, because experiencing it is much better than just, assuming something and trying to do something from the outside in, inside out, where it's at. Okay, so, you can give your little tootsies a massage. But think of your outer knees just like in tree. And by the way, those cues, that's why I love some of those foundational things, because you've already said it and your students have already felt it. So then you can say, just like in tree, pull your outer knees to your outer hips. Right? And just like in tree, to lengthen the inner thighs out to the inner knees. And I don't know if you can see, but my right knee moved down. And it's not me forcing it, it's muscular work. And I'm also straight lengthening, right? They've got a lot going on, but I am not forcing, right? And I'm definitely not using something else to try and activate. So outer knee into outer hips, inner thigh out to inner knee, using the muscles to do the thing that they're doing to do the thing. And if for you want to hinge, feel free. For me, it's enough to be right here. Right? Before we close, I think I promised a pigeon, so I feel like we have to go there. If pigeon's not for you, you can come onto your back, or you can take the 90-degree sit again. Otherwise, however you like to get into pigeon. If you want to do a downward dog first, I'm going to do my left side because already told you what. A lot of times, that same thing as the 90-degree sit, we try and offset, and we kind of rock to the front side hip, right? And the other leg goes out, and then nothing's in alignment, and the lower back's not going to get anything, and then we're going to have just heavy weight over that joint. So you got to walk the back leg in. In fact, you could, activate your hamstrings, whether it's keeping your heel toward your bum and then re-extend it. Oh, hello, it's line. Crease the front hip crease. Bring your hands or forearms to the floor. And if pigeon for you doesn't feel warm and fuzzy, it feels like it's flipping you the bird, then flip over and take pigeon on your back, where you take the foot across your thigh, and everything else is the same. Now, just like we did in tree, and especially when we come into a prone position face down, it's harder to see what we might be saying. So just like we did in bound angle or in tree pose, think about pulling your pigeon leg, right, your front leg, outer knee to outer hip, pull in, inner thigh, inner knee, extend out. And old school used to be shin parallel to the front of your mat, hinge. And some people, depending on where their hip socket and their femur sits in the pelvis, some people might be able to do that. For a lot of us, it's not going to get into the hip. It's going to exacerbate the knee and not feel great. So instead of trying to get your shin parallel to the front of your mat, keep your knee joint closed and work from the hip, which has that full, 360-degree range of motion. Ish. The back leg, same thing as the locust leg, right? So you can firm up the front of the thigh, your hamstrings can engage, and it's not a passive pose. I mean, it can be, but if we think about what we're working and how we're engaging, we can get a little more benefit from it. It can feel really good. And I'm not saying you can't just completely let go. You can, but for today's class. All right, take your time. And on the other side. So if you wanted to take a little vinyasa through, feel free. If you wanted to take child's pose or downward dog. I already did a almost 90-minute class today, and I've been shoveling and slanting, so my hips, my whole body is like, I'm done. But if you want to take a chaturanga, feel free. Okay, other side. So whether you're in pigeon or on your back or 90-degree sit, totally up to you. If you're in pigeon, walk your back leg in so that it's aligned with your hip. Press firmly into the top of your foot. Engage quads. Engage your hamstrings. Crease the outer right hip, or whatever the front leg is. The outer hip. Pull the knee to the outer hip, and from the inner thigh, lengthen out to the inner knee. Balance between your legs. And you can bring your forearms down. That feels good. Take your time. Child's pose, knees to chest, downward dog, whatever feels good. And I'm just gonna, unless you've got questions for me, which if you do, great. But if you don't, so if you do, let me know. But if you don't, I think a moment in Shavasana would be a perfect way to rest not only the muscles, but your mind. If you've got questions, pop in. Otherwise, Shavasana for a moment. Allow your muscles to relax, create a little more space in your jaw hinge. You could even lick your lips and swallow. That sometimes helps to relax to the jaw. You have this ability, not just an ability, but the need for us to be able to, from the inner of ourselves, extend out into our world, to society. And at the same time, we need to pull from the outer and draw back into the self. One of my teachers talks about being this conduit, how energy flows through us, and how if we move with the energy rather than get knocked over by it, can then again move the energy back out. This conduit, like we're the faucet. And when we tap into our body, which Iyengar, I think, referred to as the bow, and our breath, the arrow, and our awareness, our aim, we will hit the target every time. The target of moving outward in our world as we also remember and create that place for self. And that's not just a philosophical teaching, but we just did that. We went from the innermost layers, the skeleton, moved outward, the outer back into the inner. Bring a little movement into your fingers and into your toes, which isn't coincidence, right? It's definitely everything is affected by the other. Take a comfortable seat. Create a little more length through the sides of the waist, sides of the body long, rooting down through. Think about the skeletal structure, your foundations, and then your musculature tissues. Think about co-contracting, that hugging the muscles to the bones to create the lift. So the root to rise concept.